All right, I'm going to just keep it brief. I'm going to let Kate Lyons, who's the president of the, Kate Lyons, who is the president of the board of directors of the CFA Society, do the welcome and some of the introductions, but I'm really happy to see you all here. Thank you, students, for devoting your effort and your time to this. I think it's going to be great for you long term, but we as a society also really appreciate your efforts because it's been helpful for the society as well. Kate's going to take it from here and then I'll come back to you. Just as a big overview, we're going to send one team out. While the first team presents, they'll swap and then we'll come back and do a little fun activity while the judges deliberate, and then we will announce the winner. All right. Mark, where do you want me to start?
Right where she was.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so good morning. My name is Kate Lyons, and I am the president of the CFA Society Board of Minnesota, or the board of the CFA Society of Minnesota. I'd really like to welcome everybody here. It's our kickoff pilot ethics challenge, and I'm very excited to be a part of it, and I'm glad you're here. It'll help you learn a little bit more today about how ethics is the foundation of the investment industry and how we promote these ethics to better our industry. The CFA Society of Minnesota is founded in 1952. I'm not used to talking with the math, so it's hot. And it's the 11th largest society. So in the United States, we have over 1,400 members across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and South Dakota. Our society offers a lot of opportunities for professionals and for students. We do networking, we do educational, we do exam support, and challenges like these in the research challenge that some of you are part of. Our schedule this morning is no longer on the screen, but that's okay. You guys probably have plenty of time to see it. We're going to try to stick to the schedule as best as possible so everybody can get to class on time. For those of us working, I think we're fine if we run a little long. It's fine with me on Friday. So each team will have 10 minutes to present their case, 10 minutes for question and answers from the judges, and then we'll have time for presentations. Those will be the presentations. You'll get a 1-minute warning, and then time will be called so that you will be given the hook if you go a little long. So I'm going to take a minute to introduce the judges now. Over here, and I'll have you stand up, Matt Bryant. He is the chair of our education committee and one of our longest standing board members. He's been on board for quite some time. He was formerly with Wells Capital, but if you've been following the news, it's now Allspring Global Asset Management as of Monday. So they were taken private. Next in line is Phil Stern. He's our newest board member. And on the Membership and Ethics Committee, he's Chief Operating Officer at Compass Capital Management. So we're glad to have him on the board and part of the inaugural Ethics Challenge. And then I've already introduced myself. I'm president of the board. I've been on the board for a while. I started on the membership committee, working with Amanda, and I am a senior portfolio manager at BMO Private Bank. So before we start the cases, I'm going to give you a little background on the ethics challenge. Okay, actually, first, I'm going to say thanks to all of our sponsors because they're the ones that help make everything possible in our society. Also, it's good to know that these are a lot of local companies that are supporting what we do here, supporting you and standing behind you. Also, think of it a little bit as a job board, right? So people that go through and connect with through the society. Okay, so the Mission of Cfa Institute, we're looking to lead the investment profession globally by promoting the highest standards of ethics. If anybody has seen The Wolf of Wall Street, like it just doesn't paint us in a good way. But really what we're fundamentally doing is making sure that we're protecting and being ethical in all that we do when it comes to investments. This challenge fulfills this mission by promoting best practices, getting you exposed to how the industry works, some of the challenges that come into play, some of those ethical dilemmas that you may come in contact with. And so it gives you an opportunity to be prepared for those types of challenges. So this challenge is actually pretty new. It started in 2014 in Morocco. And it was just kind of a grassroots effort, and it's gone on globally now. There are about 20 And like I said, this is the first one we're doing in the Midwest, so it's very exciting. It's our kickoff. And just for anybody looking to take the CFA exams, the ethics is a very large weight in the exams. So it's one thing to know the math and the investments, but it's you'll fail the test if you don't know the ethics. And then I'm going to try to play a video on the framework for ethical decision making. Go down and click on it one more time. Scroll down. Perfect. Hit that arrow.
The ethical decision-making framework provides a lens for situations in which the answer is not simply right or wrong, and helps you identify, consider, act, and reflect on important factors to consider when faced with an ethical dilemma. First, identify the inputs needed to make an informed choice. What is the ethical principle at issue? Are there any conflicts of interest? Who do you owe a duty to? What are the important facts? Next, consider what else may affect your course of action. Are there any negative situational influences or biases steering your analysis? What are the alternative actions that may be a better choice? Can others give you guidance in this matter? Now you are ready to act, which could include making a decision to take multiple actions, to take no action, or to elevate the issue to a higher authority. Afterward, reflect on what you have learned and identify your strengths and weaknesses, which will help you make ethical decisions more quickly in the future. Refer back to this ethical decision-making framework as you work through the cases in the rest of the field manuals.
And then, where do I go? Yes, yeah, right.
I'll take over.
Oh, that's good.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. That was great. All right, so let me go back. All right, so at a very high level, the Code of Ethics will serve as a general guide for how community members, investment professionals should act. And then the standards of conduct are more specific, and they serve as benchmarks for minimally acceptable behavior. So you can certainly have higher ethical behavior, but the standards of conduct will be the minimal acceptable level. And they are meant to be fairly specific, and they help clarify the situation. And students today will be referring to both the Code of Ethics and the Standard of Conduct. We're not going to go through all of them, but they're here as a reference. They're on the sheet that I handed out, which is available if you didn't grab it. But I think what we want to do is get to the case. So I'll give a brief overview of the case. You in 390 have seen the case, but we have guests from other places. So at a very high level, and you'll see these slides in the student presentations, we have an investment advisory firm that is in Florida. At this firm, there's a senior professional. His name is Covey Hildebrand, and there is a junior professional. Her name is Helena McCabe. Helena is actually sitting for the CFA. She's passed levels 1 and 2 and is sitting for level 3, so she's familiar with the code and the standards. The investment advisory firm, HCA, they use Hutton Financial to implement a lot of their trades. So when we say custodian and clearing broker, we mean that they're doing some of the back office and implementation of the strategies that the advisor recommends. So the potential clients are Arvind and Bhavani Rao, and they have been referred to this firm by their lawyer. So Covey, the senior professional at the firm, has made a couple of recommendations for Helena, the junior professional. Perhaps he's the mentor or the boss in this situation. He suggests that she establish a referral network with both accountants and lawyers. So often advisors are asked by their clients, who do you recommend for legal work or accounting work? And what he says is, I share a percentage of the fees earned with any referring professionals and receive the same in return. So the accountants, the lawyers, and Covey have an arrangement where if they refer clients back and forth, there's an exchange of some value. And Covey says, as long as HCA approves of the arrangement, you don't have to disclose these fees. He also says for clients that are nearing retirement, that he encourages them to take their company-sponsored 401k plans and to roll them over into IRAs with HCA. And he says once clients have rolled over the employee-sponsored plans, he then recommends that they sell the mutual funds and other investments so they can start investing with Covey with a clean slate. So bring over your employee-sponsored plans, sell the assets, start investing anew with Hildebrand. And then the last slide we'll share before the students go is that he also says, after I do their IPS, investment policy statement, if the client wants to invest in mutual funds, he only recommends the firm's mutual funds, Hutton's mutual funds. They have high fees, but he claims they also have good performance. They have a confidential agreement with Hutton, the firm that they have the relationship with for implementation and custodial and clearing, to share a portion of the fees. And because this arrangement is in the prospectus, a document that's provided to the client or potential client, he doesn't talk about it with the clients. And then the last point is that next week, Hutton, the firm they have a relationship with, will be selling 2 new products. They're more complex products. He's going to recommend them to both his clients. One is a principal protected note linked to the S&P 500, a large cap equity index. And the second is linked to a basket of Asian currencies that are listed on the slide. All right, so that's it for the case. We are going to pull up the student presentation. So I'm going to ask, I don't remember which group I have first. I'm going to ask Emily D, Hannah, and Luke to leave the room. And then we will have the other group come up. All right. Yeah. All right, you guys on your timer. When I wave a piece of paper, I'll be sitting over there. You have 1 minute. Exactly. Does your firm do all this stuff? Does your firm do all this stuff? Yeah. All right, I'm going to start the clock and then you may start. Good luck.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Emily, and alongside me is Mallory and Jake. And we're going to skip through the first few slides, which just give an overview of the case, which Professor Carter just talked about. And we're going to jump right into the CFA standards that we believe were most violated within this case.
Right, yeah, so to start us off, Standard 1, professionalism, we believe was violated. Starting with Standard 1A, knowledge of the law. This states that members and candidates must understand and comply with all applicable laws, rules, and regulations, and that they must not knowingly participate in, assist in, and they must disassociate from any of these violations. Specifically in this case, we believe that both Hildebrand and McCabe knowingly violated several standards in the Code of Ethics that we will get into through the case.
And then to follow this up, we also believe that standards 1B and 1C were also violated within this case. Standard 1B claims that all CFA members must achieve independence and objectivity in all of their professional activities, and this standard also requires that they refrain from accepting any compensation that would in fact compromise their objectivity in making investment recommendations. And in this case, we see that Hill Capital Advisors has a confidential agreement with Hutton Financial, and this agreement, while it has been permissible by both HCA and Hutton, it does in fact compromise the investment advisors at HCA from making non-objectifiable recommendations to their clients. And then along with this, Standard 1C misrepresentation refers to CFA members refraining from making any misrepresentations and making recommendations and taking actions for their clients. And in this case, we see that Mr. Hildebrand, who is a senior portfolio manager at HCA, he advises Ms. McCabe to only invest in Hutton's mutual funds because of their agreement, and they disregard that these funds might have even higher than average fees and might not completely align with their clients' portfolio needs or constraints.
The next standard we believe is violated is Standard 3, duties to clients, specifically Standard 3A and Standard 3C. First, Standard 3A is loyalty, prudence, and care. This means members must place their client's interests before their employers or their own interests. We believe McCabe failed to do this because she just automatically went with what Hildebrand said instead of doing what her clients wished. McCabe possesses greater knowledge of the investment strategies she is imposing on the Rouse and has the Rouse in a very vulnerable situation. This means that McCabe is not showing as great of care as she should. Also, something that should be noted is HCA is a registered investment advisor, which often means they act in a fiduciary capacity, which automatically encompasses the principles of loyalty, prudence, and care. Next is Standard 3C, which is suitability. Suitability means that members are responsible for recommending or taking specific actions that are consistent with the stated objectives. We believe that appropriate business decisions are not made to support the risk-averse Rouse. When making the investment policy statement for the Rouse, McCabe was able to identify that the couple was risk-averse because of their age and their retirement plan. They feel, and following the guidance of Mr. Hildebrand, she automatically went into making investing into a mutual fund instead of what was best for the clients, specifically principal protection notes. Principal protection notes are complex bonds with many additional fees and risks. She made them aware of these risks, but now how they would accurately affect their investment needs. The client's expectations and constraints were not met in this situation.
And then along with these standards, we also believe that Standard 5A was violated within this case. And this standard refers to diligence and reasonable basis. And this standard states that all members must exercise independence in making investment recommendations, along with having a reasonable basis for these recommendations that is supported by sufficient and adequate research. And as Mallory discussed in the previous slide, the principal protected notes that we see offered to the Rouse appear to have much greater risk than they would want in their portfolio. And when the Rouse bring up these risks to their investment advisor, Ms. McCabe, she neglects these risks by assuring Mr. and Mrs. Rao that Hutton Financial is the fourth largest financial institution within the region, and this is definitely not an adequate basis for making the recommendation in these PPNs.
Right, and to round us out, we have Standard 6, which is conflicts of interest. Starting off with Standard 6A, disclosure of conflicts. This regards full and fair disclosure in a plain and prominent manner about information that can be expected to impair independence or objectivity. When McCabe was meeting with the Rouse, she failed to provide full disclosure of the relationship that HCA maintained with Hutton, as well as the way in which this compromised her own independence and objectivity. Additionally, she failed to disclose the relationship between the lawyer and HCA and the manner in which the Rouse were referred to HCA by the lawyer. Had she disclosed to them in a clear and prominent manner during their meeting how HCA and Hutton were affiliated and the fees associated with that, they would have avoided this standard violation. However, she did not, and she listened to her superior's advice, leaving that to the prospectus and also just not even mentioning the lawyer. It's important to note that it is listed in the prospectus, the relationship between HCA and Hutton. However, we do not believe that this merits a clear and prominent disclosure of this relationship. And secondly, we believe they violated Standard 6B, referral fees. This states that members must disclose to their clients and prospective clients any compensation received from or paid to others for the recommendation of products or services. This is very similar in nature to their violation of Standard 6A. However, this one pertains particularly to the relationship between the lawyer Bob, who referred the Rouse to McCabe, and his financial compensation received for doing that. They did not disclose to the Rouse this financial compensation in any way, shape, or form. It was not in a prospectus or anything. So that is how they violated this standard. And yeah, so rounding out course of action. So what should HCA do now? First off, we believe they should disclose all information to clients in a clear and prominent manner with the intention to clear up any confusion that clients may have and also to start off on the right foot in their next chapter. We believe that this will also help them to avoid violating any of these standards in the future. Also, we believe that McCabe should be reassigned and that the Rouse should also acquire a new investment advisor. We believe that McCabe should be reassigned in order to take time to learn from her mistakes and potentially complete the CFA Exam 3 if that is allowed. Secondly, we believe the new investment advisor would hopefully provide unbiased advice to the Rouse in the future and would be able to offer a formal apology to them.
Next, another course of action we'd like to take is to notify the CFA Institute of the violations by both CFA member and candidate, Mr. Hildebrand and Ms. McCabe.
CFA Institute.
We believe that that they compromise the reputation of the CFA Institute and they should be notified of the violations that happen at HCA. We also believe that the company should adopt a personal code of ethics. This can be done by the Asset Manager Code of Professional Conduct that is provided by the CFA Institute. We believe this will help the company perform in a more ethical manner in the future. And then finally, we believe a refresher course on CFA Institute Standard of Professionalism should be done for all members. Typically, CFA members are supposed to refresh themselves, but we think doing it company-wide would eliminate this problem in the future. Thank you, and any questions?
All right, now we're going to have a Q&A period, so if the judges or Professor Holland would like to ask a question, we have about 10 minutes to do so. Yes, very exciting. Can I start while the judges gather their questions?
Sure.
All right, so students, I'm wondering if anything that these guys did was okay. Was there anything in the case that you thought was not a violation of a code?
We believe that the standard of duties to employees, specifically loyalty, was upheld within the case. We believe that both investment advisors remain loyal to their employer and their decisions, and they also remain loyal HCA with their relationship with Hutton as well, and that their agreement is permissible by both parties.
A question I would have, excuse me. So in looking at the conversion of the portfolio coming in, would you see that as being allowable from shifting their 401k to their IRA? And this is one of the two-part questions. And then the second part being, looking at the Hutton mutual funds, could you see this as being an appropriate investment in any case?
As far as the conversion from the IRA to just the cash and then back into what they wanted to invest in, we do not see any problem with that as long as the Rouse agree with it. And then additionally, with the, could you repeat the second part of your question?
The second one, and so looking at some of the underlying Hutton mutual funds, would you see this as being a permissible, allowable investment?
Yes, I do not believe that there's anything inherently wrong with the Hutton mutual funds. I think we believe that the issue is in the deliverance of it. It didn't really line up with their investment objectives, as there are unknown risks to these, as well as the fact that they didn't disclose a lot of the reasoning and motives behind putting them in it, i.e. the financial compensation McCabe would receive from the fees from those funds.
Great. If you could help me just clarify your thinking on two things that are, I guess, related. You started at the beginning by talking about 1B, independence and objectivity, and the potential that they are getting referral fees violating, I think maybe I'm violating that part of the code, and then later you talk about referral fees and say what they did wrong, but they just didn't disclose it. So how do those two? So was it a violation or was it a violation because they didn't disclose it, or how do are those two things contradictory, or how do you that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think we found that the main issue was that because they didn't disclose this, it doesn't allow the investment advisors to remain objective, and it doesn't give their clients the opportunity to understand fully maybe what the investment advisors know about these mutual funds. So I think we believe that they both kind of relate to each other. However, if they were to have disclosed all of the information in a very simple and basic way to their clients, then this would prevent them from being objective in their decisions.
Any other questions?
I have one. In the plan for resolution, there were a few steps. What do you see as the most important and immediate steps to take?
I think the most immediate step that should be taken is to notify the CFA Institute of this violation. I think they would help us in what we should do as what HCA should do as a company in the long run. I think, and they would also help with how to handle McCabe and Hildebrand in the future.
Excellent. Anything else? Nope.
So, a couple on that, which is, so you call the CFA Society, anybody else that you might call as you're kind of thinking this through, or like how might you sort of decide if you should reassign or perhaps terminate Mr. McCabe?
Yeah. I think also in our company, we should bring it up to the Chief of Compliance Officer in our company and see what he would have to do with McCabe. We really didn't know if they should be like terminated or just kind of get a slap on the wrist. It just was hard to understand from the case. So I think bringing it to someone that knows more information would be beneficial.
Yeah. Have any of you had any situations like this without naming names, or have you ever been pressured to push a product that perhaps made more money for the firm where you were early in your career, not where you are now, of course?
I mean, that was the first thing we were.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, just want to say, let me answer that. But
Yeah.
that's right. The other thing, I don't think is part of the case, so I'll just give a practical answer. I think you said all the right things. The other resource you have in the situation, you're not sure what to do with the person, generally you'll have an attorney that you can call as well to get advice on HR and kind of handling people. Anyway. But yeah, I mean, what we kind of reacted to, our first reaction was both thinking the same thing. I remember sitting in your seat in college before being into the industry, like, oh my God, this is such like a silly case. It's so obvious these are violations, like you never come into this, but I mean, this.
It seems so black and white, and then when you're actually in the field, you're like, oh, I'm like rethinking some stuff. I'm like, yeah, no.
This is a real case. I think it's from 2015.
Yeah, and I think when you learn more about the industry, I think this happened, this can come up at just about every firm, right? So if there's really a gray area. The one thing I would say with the adaptive personal code of ethics, I apologize if I missed this in the case, did the firm already have any compliance or adoption of principles? It does?
It doesn't say.
Yeah, the case is silent on that.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
silent
it
on that?
doesn't.
Then instead of adapt, I would say adopt. Yeah, they need to at least start complying.
Yeah, most, for the students in the room, most firms will adhere to like the law. Then they will adhere to the profession's code, whatever that is. Some of you are future CPAs, you'll have your own code. The CFPs have their own code. CFAs have their own code. And then the firm will have their own policies and procedures. A lot of it will overlap. And the firm one generally is more granular or specific about the firm's situation. But the case was silent on that.
Okay.
So. All right, excellent, thank you. All right, you guys get a 10-minute, 15-minute break. Would you send in the next team?
Yeah.
All right.
You got one?
Yeah.
All right. When I wave a white piece of paper, you have 1 minute left.
Where should we stand? Do they say?
Right, yeah, right there. That's good, right, Mark?
Yeah, if one of you wants to go on the other side of the screen, that's fine, but wherever you're comfortable, I got you.
All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Pam King. This is Emily, and this is Luke Vickers. We'll be presenting on the ethics challenge this morning about the rouse. So you've already heard the overview of the case. Again, we are analyzing a case that has a sort of a senior portfolio manager and a level 3 candidate, a junior manager at HCA. And the first thing that we want to do is analyze some of the standards that were violated in the case.
So the first standard that was violated was 3C regarding suitability for the client. And members must be making a reasonable inquiry into a client's individual financial situation that has many different aspects to it prior to making any investment recommendation. So these are the violations in the case where Hildebrand took all of my clients who are in retirement or who are nearly retired. So basically just grouping clients together by one seniority rather than looking at the entire financial situation as a whole. And then I only recommend Hutton's mutual funds, so saying that one fund will work for every financial situation. And then the CAIA says before creating your IPS, I recommend that you roll over your employer-sponsored retirement plans, which is a clear violation because she's making the IPS prior to actually looking at the client's financial situation. And then the next one was 4C regarding responsibilities of supervisors. So supervisors must try to ensure compliance in those under their authority. Hildebrand clearly violates this by making 5 overarching recommendations to McCabe as her superior, all of which violate the code or one of the standards. And then, so when advising McCabe, Hildebrand makes insufficient effort to ensure she, as a subordinate, follows the code and standards, and in turn, this is leading to him not following this.
Moving on to standard 5A, investment companies are required to have recommendations that are well supported and analyzed, so they need to have reasons behind their investment recommendations. When we look at this case in particular, Hildebrand only recommends Hutton mutual funds because HCA has an agreement with Hutton where they receive some of the fees from this mutual fund company. So they receive higher profits for recommending this fund. So we don't believe they're doing due diligence in this case by only recommending Hutton funds. They are not finding the best investment option for the client, but instead finding the investment options that bring them as a company the most revenue. And because they don't have super clear analysis and backing for their recommendations, we believe it's hard for them also to uphold standard 5B, which is communication with clients. Essentially, they're recommended to explain to their clients why they made the decisions and the recommendations that they did. And we don't believe that they did that in this case. In fact, Hildebrand explained that to McCabe that he doesn't want her to do very thorough explanations to the clients because he believes it would confuse them.
So since we sort of organized our standards according to the Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct, in this case just for readability with the standards we thought were most important, the next one is Standard 6, which is included in the conflicts of interest category. And in this case, the standard is that you have to disclose, if you are a CFA society member or candidate, you have to disclose conflicts of interest, not just to your clients, but also to your prospective clients and to your employer as well. So in this case, the action that violates this is that Hildebrand states that the HCA has a confidential agreement with Hutton, keyword confidential, that it will share a portion of the fees with HCA advisors, so that they will only recommend Hutton funds. In the CAIA, we actually see her sort of implement this with her clients in Rouse. She only recommends that they only buy Hutton notes and funds. The violation here is that because they have an incentive to recommend these funds, and they fail to disclose the possible conflict of interest, they're not following the standard.
Now, very similar to that issue, investment advisors are also required to disclose referral fees or any sorts of agreements in that nature that they have to clients. Now, in this case, HCA has an agreement with some accountants and lawyers that the two companies would recommend each other to their clients and would receive a portion of the profits that arise from those recommendations. And they do not disclose these referral agreements or these fees to their clients. In fact, Hildebrand explicitly advises McCabe not to disclose these agreements that they have with their clients, and so this is a clear violation of Standard 6C.
So one of the more overarching violations that we saw throughout the case was 3A regarding the loyalty through the care to the clients.
So members must act for the benefit of their clients and put their clients' interests above their own and their employer's interests. So Hildebrand says it will be easier for me and I do not disclose to my clients. And then McCabe just avoids telling her clients about the referral fees and the patent conflict of interest in general. And this violation is that they aren't transparent with their clients, and it's clear that they're making choices that put themselves first rather than being the best thing for the client or the client's portfolio.
So following sort of the cycle of decision making for ethics, we've identified the standards a little bit, and then we wanted to dive in deeper to the considering aspect. So one specific thing we wanted to touch on was the code of ethics itself. So it sort of serves as the overarching principles ahead of the standards of professional conduct. So all the phrases you're seeing under Hildebrand and McCabe here are phrases from the code of ethics, except some of them are violations. So Hildebrand acts without integrity and diligence because he's essentially misleading a new employee, someone who's sort of in a vulnerable position because they don't have as much experience with him, and that's in violation of the code of ethics. He also is placing his personal interests ahead of his client's interests in terms of not disclosing things and not giving enough information to determine suitability. On the other hand, McCabe is actually improving her professional competence, in our opinion, by heeding sort of the senior portfolio manager's advice. She is attempting to take that advice and implement it into practice. However, she should still be knowledgeable about these standards because she's going to sit for the CFA Level 3 exam. And she's not exercising her independent professional judgment, which is another aspect of the code of ethics. So because of this, our conclusion is that both of them are violating the code of ethics. But our opinion is that Hildebrand is in a greater violation because his position gives him some authority and influence, and he's misusing those.
So we felt that the best course of action, specifically for Hildebrand, is to disclose his standard violations on his membership renewal that each member of the CFA Society of Minnesota will have to do per year, and then some additional ethics training to keep the CFA Society membership, not only for the company, but for himself as well, because he should be caring about this, and that would be exercising the loyalty for his care as well. And then from McCabe's perspective, upon identifying the violations made by Hildebrand, and also dissociate from Hildebrand and report him to another supervisor. And as Hannah was saying, she needs to be exercising independence and objectivity. So she could do this by finding a new supervisor or even finding a new company.
Moving on to the perspective of the employer or HCA as a whole, they need to have three changes to their process. First of all, they need greater oversight of the training process. So if, for example, there had been a compliance officer looking over the training that Hildegard was giving McCabe, or maybe even in the room while McCabe was being trained, some of these issues could have been nipped in the bud. It would have been a much smaller issue than it was in the case that we saw. The second action we recommend is corrective action towards Hildebrand. So we recommend several things. We recommend a written note that explains the way that Hildebrand has been violating the code of ethics and advocating for changes in his actions. We also recommend that he's encouraged to change his actions, or his employment will be terminated from the company, because the company at the end of the day needs to value ethics above all else. Finally, we recommend additional ethics training for Hildebrand and some recommendations towards the way he trains his employees. We recommend similar actions towards McCabe, though probably less severe given that she was just following the advice of her manager in this instance. Finally, we recommend a preventative reporting system. There needs to be a clear way that employees, such as McCabe, can report the ethics concerns they have with other employees. This needs to be confidential so they aren't worried about their job prospects and employment if they report things, and they need to be able to simply ask questions and report potential violations that they see in other employees. Had McCabe known about this and the importance of it, this could have been a much smaller issue. She could have asked some questions about the advice Hildegard was giving her and potentially have avoided a lot of the issues we saw in this case. So the company needs to make it very clear that they value ethics highly and have a way to report ethics violations. Because at the end of the day, nothing is more important than doing what is right.
Thank you for your time.
All right, are there any questions from the judges or Professor Holland?
I have a question. So you did a really good job of laying out the code and the standards that I really liked. Is there anything in your personal value system that gave you a pause as you went through this case?
I can talk about this one. We were actually just discussing out in the hall sort of how our personal values would impact this, particularly Christian values for some of us. And there was something in me that made me a little hesitant to say that McCabe should face a lot of punishment, because I sort of feel some sympathy for her because it seems like she's being misled. And I think there's a lot of importance to giving grace and forgiveness. And so in my opinion, I hesitated to say that she should be subject to very stringent punishment for any of these things, which maybe she wouldn't be if she was given a warning. But yeah, so I guess I thought that maybe giving grace was a reason to sort of go easy on a first violation.
I have a question. You had mentioned in one of your slides that I believe it was the overarching recommendations as it relates to rolling over the 401k, and that was a violation. In what circumstances would that maybe not be a violation? What could they have done around that to make that an acceptable move? Or was it never going to be an acceptable move?
So that could definitely be acceptable, especially if they look at the client's actual information and financial portfolio and background, and especially the suitability of the client prior to making that rollover decision.
So the violation of 5D is research and due diligence. My question is, do you think it's possible that they didn't violate that and they did enough research, and I guess if not, why would that apply, or if it is possible, what would that apply?
Yeah, I would say there's no indication in the case that we saw that they were doing a lot of research and really looking into different mutual funds and which funds are best for the clients they have. It really looks like they're only looking at the funds from this Hutton mutual fund company because that gives them the highest profits as a company. If they had been looking at all the different aspects of the client and various fund alternatives, they still could have landed on Hutton, and that would have been perfectly fine. But we think because they were only considering this one mutual fund company, they aren't really considering the client's best interest in this case.
I have a question. Since I'm a former derivatives person, would those structured notes ever be acceptable in a retirement account? Is there any scenario where structured notes would be acceptable?
From what I was learning about them, it seems like they can be risky, and it certainly seems like they weren't explained well enough to the clients in this particular instance. They're clearly extremely complex, and it doesn't have the same. It appears that you get your principal back, so it's completely safe, but it's not actually that completely risk-free because of the options that are put into it. So directly answer your question, I guess it's possible, but I doubt in this case that it was best for their portfolio because they're right at retirement.
One quick question I had, and I didn't know anything about the size of this firm or anything coming into this, but my question for you, based on recommendations, if this was a two-person, if HFA was a two-person shop versus if HFA was part of a broader and larger company, would your recommendations for what to do going forward be different?
I think that would depend on, I guess, maybe more of the personal side for Hildebrand and Katie, because if the company isn't putting those in place, and maybe it's too big of a company where they're not actually measuring the progress as well. Maybe if McCabe's feeling like nothing's changing, then leaving the company would be maybe the best possible option.
Yeah, I would say we obviously had the assumption they were a larger company, But if it was only the two of them, I would probably recommend having some sort of third party at times look over their processes, just so there isn't as much bias in this instance, because obviously both of these people, their direct jobs is finance recommendations, so it would be better to have someone who isn't directly working with those clients, just looking over the process at times.
Anything else? All right, excellent, thank you. What we'll do now is we're gonna let the judges deliberate. You guys can do it in the lounge or you can stay here, whatever you prefer. You wanna go to the lounge or stay here? What's the verdict?
Oh, we can go to the lounge.
All right, they're gonna do that. We'll welcome in the other team and we'll just do a short little 10-minute popcorn caselets to see, we'll see if Professor Holland gets the right answer on the ethics cases we're about to look at. I bet you will. And then the judges can come back in when they're ready and tell us the winners. And if you'd like to comment on anything, please feel free to do that. All right. You guys, that was so good. I mean, we hear this in the CFA Research Challenge as well. We in the investment industry we didn't have these challenges when we were your age. And when I go to the CFA Research Finals, or I see you guys doing such good work here and in class, you guys are so far ahead of where any of us were at your age. So it's good to see, it's inspiring, and keep up the good work. So I guess that's all I'll say about that. Let me pull up our caselets, just to give the judges a little bit of time and to give you a little bit of education. All right. There we go. All right, we're just going to look at 3 of them very, very quickly. They're super short, and I hope they'll be instructive for you. These are sourced from the CFA Institute in 2019, put out a casebook. This is available to anyone. You could go to the CFA Institute webpage, click on the ethics tab, and this is a public source document. If this is an area that's interesting to you, perhaps you're thinking about a career in compliance. If you wanted a career in compliance, this would be some of the content that you would probably use in your work. So for the first case, there's a woman named Miriam. She's an investment advisor for JVC Wealth Managers. JVC provides wealth management services to high net worth clients. So this is a retail situation, advisors with individuals coming in. And they do discretionary, diversified, risk-adjusted investment management accounts. And they invest in both mutual funds and hedge funds. So you're all either Biz 390 or higher, you know what those are. On average, Miriam has invested 74% of her clients' mutual fund assets and 63% of her clients' hedge fund assets in JVC proprietary funds. So the own firm's funds and earning JVC additional fees. So are her actions acceptable because clients hiring JVC should expect the firm will prefer investing in its own funds? B, acceptable if Miriam indicates her preference for investing clients in these funds. C, unacceptable if there are non-proprietary mutual funds and hedge funds that meet the client's needs. Or D, unacceptable because the additional fees earned by JVC violate the duty of loyalty, prudence, and care that Miriam owes her clients. All right, take a couple minutes, talk to your neighbors, and tell me if you think it's A, B, C, or D. You guys should all know. That's the thing, my brain's so fried. All right, we'll give you a pass. All right, I'll give you one more minute.
I think it's
All right. Just for fun. Just for fun. Raise your hand if you think it's A. Just for fun. What if you think it's B? All right. Who thinks it's C? And D? All right. That's kind of fun. It's B. So most of you were correct. Most of you were correct. So the best answer is B. It's actually acceptable if she indicates her preference for investing client assets in the fund. So she would have to make the clients aware, not just hand them a prospectus and let them read it, but communicate well in a clear, understandable manner that she's better off if the clients are investing in these funds. So the case involves a potential conflict of interest between providing cost-efficient investment vehicles and selling her own employer's investment vehicles. So this is the standard. You did hear about this standard in the case. And the best practice is just to avoid these scenarios. So you might have heard Phil say, Phil works for an independent firm. So his firm doesn't sell any of its own products. Schwab sells its own products, right? So in fact, the Royals Investment Fund is invested in a Schwab mutual fund via the Schwab platform. So you're going to run into in your career a lot of different scenarios or your personal life. So the best thing to do is just to avoid the conflict of interest. But it's actually okay for her to put her clients in the firm mutual funds as long as the clients understand. Yes?
So answer B, the reason I didn't go there is there's an assumption that the indicating the preference for those
Yeah.
automatically included communication with the client.
Yeah.
I was looking for something more definitive and discreet, saying
Yes.
it worked for the client as well.
Right.
So, okay.
Excellent. So it has to be clear, visible, plain language. Like the code is very clear about what is applicable. And this was based on a real actual case.
Amanda,
Yes?
my advisor is an alum,
Yeah.
and she works for Wells Fargo,
Yeah.
and I experience this all the time as a client.
Yeah. So just be a discerning client, be a faithful advisor, be a fiduciary, always do what's best for your client, and you'll be adhering to the code. All right, next one, client relationships. So this is related, but slightly different. So Korloff is a money manager. One of the clients is a pension fund. So this is an institutional manager. So Korloff is managing money for a pension fund. Accounts of 35% of the assets under management is this one client. So this one client is the biggest client of the firm, and they pay 35% of the fees, the annual fees. So the director of the pension fund said, because of the pension fund's dominance in terms of revenue for Korloff's fund, she expects Korloff to give the pension fund enhanced service. So I'm your biggest client, you give me the best service. Power of buyers, if you're thinking about porters, right? This would include advanced information on investment recommendations, priority position for IPOs, and supplemental research reports on potential investments, daily personal contact. So Korloff has to decide how to respond. This is the most important client of the firm. So A, refuse to comply. B, comply only if the preferential treatment does not disadvantage other clients. C, comply because the fund is such a large and important client. D, comply with the request because the fund is paying for the preferential treatment with the higher fees. All right, take a moment with your friends. This one I think is a little harder. Higher aggregate, so higher dollar amount.
From there, that's pretty fun. The advanced information on investment. They do priority positioning for IPOs, I think, because I tried to get into an IPO once. I couldn't get access. So I think they actually do that. Or maybe the company that was doing the IPO, they put it out to their best clients.
All right, why don't we, in the interest of time, because the third one's the most fun one, go through this one. The best answer is actually B. So you can comply with this as long as you're not disadvantaging other clients. So you can have different levels of service. You can have clients paying for different levels of service, and it's not a violation as long as the different level of service does not disadvantage the other customers. So let me go ahead and read the exact language from the society. Different levels of service cannot disadvantage or negatively affect other clients and should be disclosed and made available to all clients and potential clients. So in this case, providing enhanced service to the pension fund is acceptable as long as the preferential treatment does not disadvantage other clients and it has been disclosed. Two aspects of the request, providing advanced recommendations to the fund and giving the fund priority position for IPOs, would in fact disadvantage other clients by systematically benefiting the pension fund at the expense of others. With this in mind, B is the best response. So we did this in my job at Parametric. I could give my bigger clients, more phone calls, enhance research, run more tests or scenarios for them, but I couldn't trade them first. I couldn't give them advance warning of trading. So it's just like this case. The key here is different levels of service are okay as long as people are not disadvantaged. All right, yes?
Question,
Yes.
on the IPO piece.
Yes.
Is that true historically? Because years ago, I remember not being able to participate in IPOs because they were giving them out to their best customers.
Institutional investors are the only ones who get IPOs, and institutional investors who have been good to the underwriter, like maybe taken the less exciting IPOs, will get filled more frequently, which is a violation.
Okay,
All right.
that's what I thought.
Next one, last one, and then we'll see what the judges say. I think this is the most fun one. So David is an analyst, so someone's doing research. This is a young research analyst at a firm. He attends a presentation for analysts at the headquarters of a manufacturing company. So let's say he's working on Polaris. And Polaris invites all the analysts to go to Polaris's headquarters for information to help them do their research. So the analysts are very impressed with the presentation and ask the CEO a lot of questions. After the meeting, the head of investor relations invites all the analysts to a clubhouse for dinner and karaoke. So fancy dinner and entertainment. Most of the analysts accept the invitation. What should David do? A, accept. B, accept dinner but not the entertainment. C, accept the invitation but disclose it to his supervisor. Or D, reject the invitation. So you can look at your code of standards too. It might help you. All right.
Most companies get a gift. And so if you didn't disclose
All right. Who thinks it's A? Who thinks it's B?
I think no one should do karaoke.
All right, well, let's say it's a better entertainment. Entertainment usually Who thinks, so no one thinks it's A or B. What about C? Who thinks it's C? All right, and who thinks it's D? All right. Interesting. 2 people thought it was D. All right. Let's debrief this one. It's actually D, but I think C is the second best answer and perhaps could be defensible. So is an analyst able to be objective if they have received a gift of dinner and entertainment? Can the analyst, keep his or her objectivity? So the question turns on whether he compromises his independence by accepting the invitation. So the CFA Standard 1B states that members must use reasonable care and judgment to achieve and maintain independence and objectivity in their professional activities, must not accept any gift, benefit, or consideration that could reasonably be expected to compromise their independence and objectivity. Every firm I ever worked at, there was a strict dollar amount. Like, I had to have a gift. If the gift was under $50, I could accept it. If the gift was over $50, I couldn't accept it, or I had to pay for it myself. So one of the people on one of my desks got invited to the Masters with a client. That's like a $2,000 ticket, right? If you're golf fans, you know that. So that person was able to go, but they actually had to pay for their own ticket. So that was one solution. If I ever get a gift, no matter how small, I would have to tell my compliance officer there was actually a form. So there's a process in place. So in this case, I think you could argue, this is clearly the easiest solution. You could argue this might meet the standard as long as the supervisor was aware and the analyst was able to maintain his objectivity. So C is definitely the second best answer. All right, Holland.
I have an interesting story about my dad. My dad was a purchasing agent for a major corporation, and they had those dollar limits for gifts. And I was a kid, and we got sent a colored television. It was the first time they were out. We didn't own a colored television from one of his potential suppliers. And he went in and disclosed it because he knew he wasn't going to be able to keep it. And the CEO, they'd sent one to the CEO too, and the CEO said they could all keep their television, so we got to keep our television.
Interesting. I thought the punchline was going to be the CEO was upset that he brought it up because the CEO wanted to keep the TV on.
Well, the CEO did keep the TV and told everybody else they could keep theirs too.
That's interesting. All right. So the CFA Society is a secular institution. So why don't we take a few minutes to think about, like, how do we at Bethel, how is all of this different for us? Does anyone want to share any thoughts? Yep.
I guess the motivation for complying is different. Like, I think a lot of these align with our, like, the actions align with our Christian principles, but like the motivation for this, I mean, it's usually like kind of language that kind of works around it because there really is not like a set black and white moral guide versus like for religious people, there is like a reason for just making like personal choices that comply with that.
I think that's an excellent observation. If you're a fiduciary, right, fiduciary is a legal term, you're doing what's in the best interest of your client, that's more than just making sure investments are suitable. And then if your motivation is because you are faith-based, that's even a stricter level of compliance. Cassie?
I know, like, earlier you said, like, this was, like, the bare minimum of, like, what you should require. So I think, like, what Cassie said, it's, like, the wording is easy to, like, get around. Like, oh, it didn't specifically say that. So,
right.
But I think from, like, the Christian perspective, like, you take, like, the actual underlying value and then enhancing it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. So we think about, like, what's legal, letter of the law compliance is the lowest level. What's ethical, maybe that's adjacent to this in the business world, secular codes of ethic and standards of conduct. And then I would hope that we would all adhere to the highest standard where we're asking ourselves, what's the character of God? What's our motivation? Where's our heart? Are we serving our clients best, even if we're making a smaller paycheck? Those are the questions I would ask you to think. And then I would ask yourself, if you're Helena in the big, in the case, it's very difficult to push back on a cubby, right? That's your boss, your supervisor, might be the person who hired you, might be the person responsible for your review and your bonus. But I would encourage you to always do the right thing, even if it costs you your job. I'm fortunate I've never had to walk away from a deal, a job, a situation. I don't know, Professor Holland, have you ever had a situation where you've had to walk
I haven't had to walk away from Bethel yet.
Well, there you go. But in your Army career, did you ever have a situation where you felt you were in a compromising situation? I have one while you think about that. It wasn't me, but it was somebody I worked with. It was a bond trader, a very senior bond trader at Merrill Lynch before grad school. So when I was not much older than you. and they were Christians, and it was a casino, and they didn't want to be on the team that was the underwriting team for the casino. So the two gentlemen stepped away. Their bonuses were absolutely going to be lower because a different team did the deal, but they felt that they couldn't work on an underwriting bond that was for a casino. So not me directly, but a colleague of mine in Maryland. The firm, I was very impressed. The firm said, that's fine, we'll put you on a different deal. So they were able to keep their job and still feel good about the work they did. But you will certainly run into situations where you will be challenged. And I'm going to encourage you to always do the right thing. The right thing is often the hard thing. The right thing is often the hard thing. All right, Colin, anything you want to add?
No.
All right, yes.
I just want to add one thing. So I'm Mark, I work for the society. I don't have a CFA, and that's why I got most of the questions wrong. But one of the things that drew me to working for the organization was this ethical foundation. So my background was journalism and later on HR consulting, and this position came open, and I said, I know nothing about financial services and investments. My wife balances her checkbook. That gives you an idea of my level of expertise. But the thing that drew me to the organization was the ethical foundation and the desire, the mission to constantly improve behavior in investment management. So even if you never work directly in the industry, this stuff is really important. So the second thing that also impressed me along the way, people who hold the CFA charter, if they find themselves in this kind of a situation, their first duty on the secular side is to the charter, not to the employer. And I find that just fascinating and really terrifying for people who find themselves in that position, because guarantee you, people have been fired for doing the right thing. So, but it is the right thing to do. So that's all I wanted to add.
And Kate and I split the introductions. Mark Salter is Executive Director, and then Megan Millett is in the back. Megan does everything else.
And I get the credit.
Well, you're both a joy to work with. All right, you can take a stretch break, refresh your coffee. I'll go grab, see how the judges are doing, and then we'll announce our winners.
Did you say you were in HR?
I did at one point in time.
Would that be like firing the manager?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say congratulations to both teams. This is hard. And I remember studying the ethics for all of the exams, and it's hard to go through. They're so detailed, and there's a lot of notes, and there's a lot of nebulous things in there. So what you guys took on and the extra work to do this challenge, I want to say thank you for it, and congratulations on it. One of the biggest weightings in the exam, in the challenge was just understanding the violations. And we did count, there were 6 total violations that the firm committed. There were 2 really big overarching ones, mostly around suitability and supervisor. And I think Team 2 did a really great job of nailing those right away. Let's see. So Team 1, you had a couple, you missed 2 of the violations, but you did get a couple of the other ones. And you really highlighted the professionalism and suitability very well. I think you had a very firm grasp on that. Team 2, you guys highlighted the supervisor and suitability piece right off the bat. So great job. I think both teams, we all agree, were really well prepared, very thorough, great format in the argument. It looked like everybody worked really well together. Team 1, I thought you guys did a great job of speaking around the slides. You really knew things in and out, and were able to answer questions on the fly very well. Team 2, like Professor Holland said, you guys had a nice structure on your slides, so everything was laid out very well there, so it was easy to read. In the end, it was a very tough decision across the board, so we all had scores, and like I said, congratulations to both teams, but Team 2 ended up with the highest score, so congratulations on that. really fun exercise. And we had a lot of deliberation on our side. But I know there were a couple points,
We'll do prizes at the end.
Okay, I know there were a couple points we wanted to clarify on some of the ethics, and maybe Matt, you want to talk about the rolling over of the 401?
Yes.
Why that's okay sometimes?
Yeah, so just overall, the difference being, this is challenging. Certainly, there's a lot of gray area because we didn't really ever get an opportunity to see what the IPS was, what any of the discussions were coming in, what the mutual funds were coming into this as well. We knew they had some lower fees. However, we didn't really know if they were performing better or performing worse. But overall, you can take a 401k and roll it into an IRA, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. There's also going to be times if you're rolling a 401k into an IRA, where was that? There's only going to be the possibility of having to sell everything at the beginning anyway. I'm dealing with this right now is looking at a lot of things that are in a 401k actually can't be transferred in kind. So it might have just been cash coming in to begin with, which is not nefarious if it's just where you want to get started at. However, if I was able to roll over low-cost mutual funds into this new IRA, they could be completely suitable under the new IPS, and they also might not be. We also don't know on the Hutton side, these might be great mutual funds. It's certainly deceptive on how they're presenting it, but all of these funds, they might be great balanced funds with long-term track records that exceed other options that are out there, and they very well could be the best option for the client overall. It's definitely deceptive on how they were going about it, the way this was presented. Obviously, I think there was challenges that everybody should be facing. Like, we don't want to be seen as just trying to be greedy and get money and only directing to these, which clearly they had some violations on. But overall, having the mutual funds, having the mutual fund roll in, and even the option of selling that mutual fund and rolling it into other things is completely acceptable under the right circumstances.
Yeah, no, I know I do that for clients a lot. It's always, I always like to get their holdings first from the outside company and do the analysis and figure it out to see if we can transfer it in kind, or sometimes I can do share class conversions and get them cheaper shares to my own. Yeah.
So I just wanted you all to know that it is okay to it is okay to roll over your IRAs. They should have the IPS before the new decisions are made, though. So that was a little gray area. The IPS seemed to be a little too late before the recommendation was made. So IPS first, roll over into suitable accounts if they're proprietary accounts that needs to all be disclosed. All right, anything else from the judges?
I actually had that a little bit similar to that, is because I inherited my mom's IRA, and I had to do it differently.
Yeah.
And I just chose not to change anything for the time being, to watch it.
Yeah. All right, do you want to do the honors?
I think Phil's going to help me hand out.
All right, Phil.
Can I just add one note as well, as I thought about this, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but as you guys are looking at the case now, I think it's pretty intuitive. You look at it and go, okay, that's wrong. You shouldn't indiscriminately just choose a bunch of funds and there's conflicts. And that's obvious. I think everybody can agree. Don't lose sight of that, because what happens is, and what makes this tricky in real life, is you get into the moment, and yeah, you know deep down what's right, but like in the case, your boss, who hired you and could fire you, is telling you to do something. In addition to that, your bonus might depend on it. Your promotion might depend on it. Whether or not you hit your goals might depend on it, and that's when sort of the human side comes into this, and it's important to remember the obviousness of it right now. The things I go back to on that are, one, you know the difference between right and wrong, and it's always good to do the right thing. But if that's not enough, I think there's also a business case and a personal case to do the right thing. I'd say one, in the short term, where maybe you're giving up a sale and you get paid on commission, and you're looking at that going, I'm going to take a hit. Well, in my experience, although it might be hard, I don't know, 90% of the time, even in the short term, doing the right thing wins the day. So I think you wind up winning immediately, but even if you don't, what I will say 100% of the time is doing the right thing over the course of your career, building that as your brand, building that as your reputation will either work for you where you're at, or you'll find yourself out of a bad situation and into a better one, and there's nothing that can replace your brand and your relationships and your reputation as an ethical person. So just wanted to kind of point out the realness of this, because I know sitting looking in, it feels kind of obvious and arbitrary, but there is pieces that change as evolve. So keep this example in mind as you go. But you guys did a great job, and thanks for doing it.
Yeah, that's real helpful. Thank you. So we have, just in time for the winter, some super stylish CFA Institute beanies for everybody that participated. Right? Yes, thank you. Wear them proud, because I was
You earned them.
I was like, oh,
I know, we wanted them to have that.
yeah, we were all very
extra
excited
stress,
about those, so thank you. And then for the winning team, there's,
Which is these three, closest to you.
we have gift cards from the CFA, to Amazon. Always a good one. There you go. Thank you guys so much.
All right, I'm going to ask the participants and the judges if we could take a picture in front of the sponsor slide. Everybody else is free to go. Thank you for coming, everyone. Make sure your name is on the list. All right, well done.